Throughout history, the Spartans are renowned for their military prowess, discipline, and sheer refusal to yield in battle. Spartan warriors were trained from childhood to embrace hardship and fight to the death, rather than accept the shame of defeat. Their infamous declaration at Thermopylae, when King Leonidas and his 300 soldiers refused to surrender to the overwhelming Persian army, choosing instead to die in the battlefield, became legendary. Time and again, the Spartans exemplified this ethos, living by the maxim that surrender was not an option. However, in the long course of their military history, there was one striking exception: the Battle of Sphacteria during the Peloponnesian War, where for the first and only time, Spartan soldiers laid down their arms and surrendered to the enemy. The Battle of Sphacteria occurred in 425 BC during the 6th year of the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BC, was a protracted and destructive conflict between Athens, an economic and naval powerhouse, and Sparta, the preeminent land-based military power. Sparta led the Peloponnesian League, a coalition of city-states that opposed the growing influence of Athens and its Delian League. Early in the war, Sparta adopted a straightforward strategy. Using its superior army, it launched annual invasions into Attica, the region surrounding Athens, with the intent of laying waste to the farmlands and forcing the Athenians into submission. The Athenians, protected by their long walls, could shelter within their city and rely on supplies brought in by their powerful navy. This tactic led to plagues within the walls of Athens, and tens of thousands died, but the Athenians refused to surrender. The Battle of Sphacteria, however, represented a turning point, not just in the war, but in the image of Spartan invincibility. The conflict began when Athenian forces, led by the general Demosthenes, seized and fortified Pylos in the southwestern coast of the Peloponnese. This unexpected move placed an Athenian outpost deep in Spartan territory, threatening the nearby region of Messenia, which was home to the Helots, Sparta's enslaved population. The Spartans, alarmed by this threat, quickly responded by attempting to dislodge the Athenians through a naval assault. However, the rugged terrain and the natural defenses of the harbour gave the Athenian forces a strong advantage. Despite repeated efforts, the Spartans were unable to break through the Athenian defences. Meanwhile, an Athenian fleet arrived and decisively defeated the Spartan navy, trapping a contingent of 440 Spartans on the nearby island of Sphacteria. The Spartans, caught in a dire situation with limited supplies and no chance of reinforcement, faced a prolonged siege. Initially, it was a plan to starve out the Spartans, but the Spartans were able to secure a steady stream of food via the locals, and the Athenians were unsure if they could hold the siege during winter. Demosthenes, doubting the viability of a prolonged siege, planned an attack on Sphacteria. Noticing that only 30 Spartans were guarding the southern end, he seized the opportunity. One night, he landed 800 hoplites on both sides of the island, catching the Spartan garrison off guard and killing many. At dawn, more Athenian troops arrived. The Spartans attempted to push the Athenians back into the sea, but they were harassed by light troops stationed on high ground. Unable to reach their attackers, the Spartans retreated to the northern end of the island, fortifying their position, and a stalemate ensued. However, the Messenian commander requested permission to lead a force through rugged terrain. His plan succeeded and his troops emerged behind the Spartan defences. In this belief, the Spartans abandoned their position and the Athenians quickly seized the approaches, completely surrounding the Spartans. Just like the Battle of Thermopylae, there was only two choices: surrender or death. The Spartans laid down their arms and surrendered. This was unprecedented. Never before had Spartan soldiers, bred to fight to the death, given themselves up in battle. Even more extraordinary was the fact that 120 of the prisoners were full Spartan citizens, the elite among their warrior class. This may not sound like a huge number, but Spartan citizens were declining for almost 2 centuries at this point, and only numbered between 2,000 and 3,000 at this point. Their surrender sent shockwaves throughout the Greek world, as it appeared to contradict everything the Spartans stood for. And the surrender had profound consequences both for the Peloponnesian War and for Sparta's reputation. Athens, buoyed by this victory, paraded the Spartan prisoners as a symbol of their triumph. For the first time, the myth of Spartan invincibility had been shattered. The Greek world, long accustomed to the idea that the Spartans were an unstoppable military force, began to reconsider this notion. The Athenians now had the upper hand in negotiations, using the captured Spartans as leverage. The annual raids into Attica ceased for several years, marking a significant pause in Spartan aggression, as their prisoners would have been executed. Athens, for the next few years, took on a more aggressive role on land. Pylos remained in Athenian hands and used it to harass Spartan territory. The Battle of Sphacteria stands out as one of the most dramatic moments in the history of ancient Greece. Not because of the scale of the conflict, but because of its symbolic weight. For the first time, and only time in the long history, the Spartans, known for their unparalleled bravery and refusal to surrender, were forced to lay down their arms. The event challenged the very identity of Sparta, and sent shockwaves throughout the Greek world, changing the course of the Peloponnesian War and tarnishing the aura of invincibility that had once surrounded Spartan warriors. Though Sparta would recover militarily and eventually win the Peloponnesian War 2 decades later, the Battle of Sphacteria prolonged the war and further depleted the dwindling numbers of Spartan citizens, a problem that would eventually lead to the downfall of Sparta.